Good morning, Entertainment Brother.
Good morning, Brother Hackett.
We've got a lot on our docket, as always. More developments in the Rust case. We've got some sports to talk about.
Love it.
And a look back at that man named Oscar and what Oscar can do to improve his standing, to stand even more upright in his goldenness going forward.
Yes.
From Times Square, once again, we are the Entertainment Brothers. Hello and welcome back. I am Larry Hackett. I am joined by, as always, my entertainment brother, Thomas Valentino. And welcome to the latest installment of the Entertainment Brothers, where we go over the mechanics of the film industry, the entertainment industry, lift the hood on show business, predict the weather, the meteorology of what we call entertainment.
Yeah.
Let us begin. We have spent a lot of time over the past several months talking about the Rust case, and some of you out there may find it boring, but we find it fascinating because it literally is at the nexus of what we enjoy, which is the law, show business, and kind of reputation management, and frankly, career survival. It's really like survival.
Right.
It's like law and survival.
Yeah.
And in this case, Alec Baldwin, frankly, it's still pregame. It's still exhibition baseball, but he is doing fairly well. I would say very well from a legal standpoint. Let's remind everybody where we're at. Back in October of 2021, Alec Baldwin was making a movie called Rust. It was a Western being shot in New Mexico. A gun in his hand went off and killed the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Hutchins died. An investigation ensued that lasted well over 15 months. Alec Baldwin was very open and willing to speak to the police and to the press. After 15 months, I would venture to guess that most of us thought that no charges would be brought. There was a flurry of civil lawsuits. Most of those got settled, including the most important one, which was a settlement between Hutchins's widow, and Baldwin, which paved the way for the movie to go on, right? It looked as if everybody was in the clear. Late last year, Baldwin was charged, as was the armorer in the case, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, with involuntary manslaughter. 2 charges, one of them quite serious, about involving the death of Hutchins. In the intervening months, Baldwin has hired an attorney, Lucas Nikas, here in New York, and waged a very aggressive legal campaign to basically exonerate himself. Thing number one was the most serious charge that could have put him in jail for 5 years was eliminated because, lawyers for Baldwin argued, the law that had been passed in New Mexico was not passed until after the shooting. It could not have applied at the time of the shooting. Therefore, he was not able to be charged on that law. Prosecutors agreed. They got rid of that case. They took a swipe at his attorney when they did that, but they agreed to reduce that charge. This week, the second challenge that Baldwin's attorney had made was also successful. The special prosecutor in the case, a woman named Andrea Reeb, the woman who had done the investigation on behalf of the Santa Fe district attorney, and the woman who presumably was going to be in the courtroom bringing the case and litigating the case against Baldwin, was removed from the case because, according to per the charge or per the accusation from Baldwin's attorney, she was a member of the New Mexico legislature and therefore could not serve as a special prosecutor because she would be potentially influenced by political donations from other attorneys. They basically said that it was a conflict of interest. And again, the Santa Fe attorney agreed. So these are 2 pretrial victories that, again, presage, it seems to me, what is going to be a lopsided and overmatched case in the courtroom between Lucas Nikas, Baldwin's New York-based attorney, and the folks in New Mexico who are committed to justice for Halyna Hutchins, but at this stage of the game look woefully legally outmatched.
Yeah. But
I knew there was a but coming.
Yeah.
I could see it.
But you saw it coming from
in your mouth.
Yeah. Good. Because I did sort of exaggerate it. Okay. When I'm in these situations, and I'm not a litigator per se, but I am in adversarial situations. What I never do is I never make any assumptions whatsoever, good or bad. Sometimes you may get 10 things because if you're dealing with a lot of emotions and things of that nature, you feel like you're winning, you're winning, you're winning. And the smartest thing to do is to just stay very balanced about it and not really revel in it too much. Okay? So the two things that you're talking about, the first one in particular is significant to Alec Baldwin because it would potentially reduce the amount of time that he would spend in jail. So anytime we have something like that happening, obviously that's very important. If you're going from 5 years potentially to 18 months, that's really significant. So I think that one was a big victory. This one, to me, is really apparent. Okay, it's a conflict of interest. And even if it's not a conflict of interest, the American Bar Association rules say if it looks like a conflict of interest, if it gives the impropriety of a conflict of interest, then guess what? You have to resign or recuse yourself or not be involved in the case. I still feel this comes down to the courtroom, to the jury, and to the evidence of the different things that we've been looking at so far. And, were procedures followed? Did different things happen the way they were supposed to? I think those things are still more significant than what we've seen so far.
I don't disagree with that. I think the evidence is going to be the evidence, and this case is going to be fought in the courtroom, assuming it gets that far.
Yeah, right.
But early days suggest that the prosecutors, when I say that, I don't just mean the special prosecutor, I mean the DA in Santa Fe. I don't want to say they don't know what they're doing, but they're just being outmatched here. Let's remember what happened a couple of weeks ago when they agreed to remove the charge against Baldwin about the fire that could have put him in jail for 5 years, right? They basically agreed that the law had been passed after the shooting and therefore didn't apply to him. I guess it's that ex post facto?
Yes.
Yes.
Well said.
Thank you. And they took a nasty swipe at the attorney, basically saying, we're not going to waste our time on this because we don't want this big New York City hotshot attorney. We're not in the job of letting him give billable hours, get billable hours from his client.
Yeah.
Really?
Woo.
This is why you're getting rid of the charge? Because you don't want this guy to get rich off Alec Baldwin?
Yeah, that wasn't smart to say.
It wasn't smart, and it was an indication that, they got a little peevish about this. I'm guessing they're going to be peevish about this. I hear what you're saying about don't rest on your laurels if you've been victorious.
Right.
I don't think there's anything that suggests that Baldwin and his attorney are getting cocky because they've had these victories. In fact, I would suggest it's the opposite, and they're going to be even more out for blood. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I may be getting out way on a limb here. But I wonder whether or not, if Andrea Reeb, the special prosecutor, has been removed, can they move to try to remove her investigation against him? She should not have been. She should not have been a special prosecutor back then.
I'm not sure they can do that. It's a good move.
But what I'm saying, they will continue to try to rattle the cage of these prosecutors in New Mexico, and I think said prosecutors are sufficiently rattled.
Okay.
And I think the way they behaved last time suggests that they are really getting shaken up by this, and I think it's all good news for him. We stipulate, as always, it will come down to the evidence, as you say, and also, I think, in many ways, to Baldwin and how he's perceived, right? There is still the possibility, and clearly the people in Santa Fe telegraphed this, that they're going to paint a picture of these people from Hollywood who came out here and, didn't do what they were supposed to. They took advantage of us. They didn't follow our local regulations and mores, and they kind of did what they wanted willy-nilly. They didn't have enough money. They weren't paying attention to safety regulations, and all of that will be dutifully brought up. I'm just saying evidence is a big pile sitting on a table. Correct. It's like ingredients for a recipe.
Right.
You can make a stew. I can make a stew with the same ingredients. One of our stews is going to taste better than the other one.
Yes.
And I don't want to belabor my culinary metaphors, but that is what I think is going to happen. There's going to be evidence on the table that the prosecutors are going to try to manipulate in their way and that Baldwin's attorney will try to manipulate in his way. And if what's happened thus far is any indication, you know who's going to do a better job. Know whose stew is going to taste better.
So far, Really, if you look at it a certain way, what Baldwin's attorney has done is what any attorney would do. It doesn't mean that he's a great attorney. I mean, he is a great attorney, okay? But what he's done are things that anyone, if they're doing what he does on a daily basis, would make those motions and would do those things, okay? The first one about the law, that's good lawyering. Mm-hmm. Is that exceptional lawyering? I'm not so sure, right? A research associate does something, it's like, here you go. The one about the conflict of interest, I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer to see that one, right? You have someone who's serving in two functions and it doesn't make sense. And okay, that gets eliminated, right? So I'm not as enamored of these two moves so far as most people are, whether it's you or anyone else, right? To me, yes, again, the one about reducing the jail time, that's important because you don't want your client going in cell for any period of time.
Right.
All right. The rest of it, to me, might work against Baldwin. It might work against him when he gets into the courtroom and they feel like, look what's been going on. They're making all these moves and you don't know how people are going to react and perceive this. But I'll tell you something. Never, ever, ever. This is like if you're fighting someone in a fight in a ring and you're punching them and they're going down on the ropes. And how many times have we seen this? And you're virtually certain to declare that someone's been knocked out and all of a sudden Rocky, okay, or whoever gets back up and wins the fight. So my point is I never, ever, ever underestimate any attorney that passed the bar and that practices in a prosecutor's office or anywhere else, my experience has been that they're all very, very competent in all areas of law. So what I'm saying is, out there, everybody, do not make any assumptions here until we get into the courtroom, Paw.
You've seen Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh, many times.
All right. Alec Baldwin in Alec.
Ironically enough.
ABC.
Yes.
Always be closing.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have a new ABC. Mm-hmm. Always be challenging.
Yes. Okay.
And that's what his attorney is doing.
And that's exactly what he's supposed to do.
I know.
He's not just supposed to sit there.
Well, and to your point, I mean,
he's doing a good job.
Okay. I just think, early days with talking about evidence. The evidence we have thus far is that the folks in Santa Fe are bordering on hapless. Okay. You heard it here first.
Whoa. No.
We are nothing if not provocative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't think Mary Carmack Altweiss was going to be coming on our show anytime soon. But I'm being serious. The person they hired, I know you've said and thought that maybe they'll hire someone even better to be the special prosecutor.
Or just as good.
I admire your belief and optimism.
It's based on practice.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, I've gone up against attorneys that, that I've never heard of, and then they blew me away on what they knew.
Move over Drew Bledsoe. Here comes Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
That's a segue, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did you get the segue?
Of course I did.
From one quarterback to
another.
Who was even better than that one?
As a former quarterback, you're asking me this.
And look where we are. Our second story today is about the developments here in New York. Now, we often don't cover sports, but sports for us is kind of like at the intersection of entertainment. And nothing, perhaps, is closer to that intersection of entertainment and sports than the story that is blooming here in New York this week, which is what may be the imminent arrival of Green Bay's quixotic quarterback, Aaron Rodgers.
Love that, quixotic.
To fill the legendary white shoes once worn by one Joe Willie Namath. Now, I'm hearkening back to a quarterback that, basically last threw a football for the Giants during the Nixon administration. Mm-hmm. But that's a sign of how desperate and hapless and tragic, frankly, the quarterback situation here is the New York Jets. Let me just throw out one statistic to you. The New York Jets, in the past 30-odd years, have probably had 10, 12, 15 starting quarterbacks?
I'd say it's somewhere between 10 and 15.
I would too.
Yeah.
The Green Bay Packers have had two.
Two.
Brett Favre
Yeah.
and Aaron Rodgers. If all goes according to plan, both of those men will end their careers wearing a different color green.
Mm-hmm.
The green of gangrene here in New York. Now, you have pointed out that, we'll get to Rodgers in a minute, you have pointed out that the past experience of Green Bay quarterbacks coming to New York is not a good one.
No.
You care to elaborate?
Well, Brett Favre came here, and not only did he not really do anything.
And I think he had retired at one point. Wasn't he retired?
Yeah, it was just so strange. I think he came, he retired, and he went back or whatever. But the bottom line is, not only did he not deliver on the football field, but there were also some sexual harassment allegations.
He delivered other things. Then those would be
did deliver.
Those would be pictures that the young people have been named for that rhymes. The second word is pics.
Yes.
And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Right. And so his demise in New York was quick. He did nothing for the Jets. But then again, the Jets, that's barely noticed because there were so many quarterbacks. He's just in the long line of quarterbacks. Rodgers, we assume, will be different. Now, this is all assuming that all this is going to get worked out and that Green Bay and the Jets can agree on the trades and what it's going to cost to get Rodgers here. From where we stand and what we do, I'm going to find this is going to be a very interesting story. The New York papers are already aflame with stories about Rodgers, about Rodgers' feuds with reporters at ESPN, about Rodgers' kind of, like I said, quixotic demands and his behavior. He had spent time in the offseason in some kind of dark tank or dark retreat. So he's a colorful guy. The New York press is going to eat that with two spoons. There's a famous photograph of Joe Namath in Miami on the eve of the Super Bowl. I guess it was Super Bowl III. Entertaining reporters as he, sat in Shea's lounge, in his bathing suit with his shirt off. Yeah. And it's a legendary picture.
It is a legendary picture.
And the point being that Joe Namath did win that Super Bowl, but if you look at the arc of his career and you look at his numbers compared to other, top tier quarterbacks, they're not there. Right? There are some people who argue that Joe Namath shouldn't even be in the Hall of Fame. But he was an incredibly charismatic character in New York. And again, 50 years later, people still remember him and the New York that he embodied. It was Fun City. It was the end of the 60s, the beginning of the 70s. He wore the fur coats. He wore the white shoes. He had fantastic hair. He posed nude in Playgirl. He was, talking about entertainment, he was a true entertainer.
He was in movies.
He brought but not only that, he brought the NFL from the Johnny Unitas crew cut era.
Absolutely.
And the high top black shoes to being show business.
Yep.
Right? They didn't call him Broadway Joe for nothing.
Absolutely.
And I wonder whether or not Rodgers will do the same here. Rodgers is a prickly fellow.
Yes.
Right? He made his announcement yet again on about his desire to come to New York on this podcast.
The Pat McAfee show.
The Pat McAfee show.
Yeah.
Pat McAfee seems to be the only reporter that he talks to.
More or less.
He's going to get a stern lesson when he comes to New York. And come the third game of the season, he'll already be feuding with people. He won't be going to the locker room, the post-game press conference.
Right.
There'll be all kinds of mayhem.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Correct.
It'll be Ricky Henderson. There's a New York reference. It'll be Ricky Henderson all over again.
Right.
But we find that very amusing. And he might find it amusing too, for all we know. Is this good news? Is this across the board good news, do you think?
Well, it's better news than, if you're a Jet fan, than what we have currently, which is not a lot.
We'll stipulate that.
Okay.
What about, again, in the kind of broader realm than we deal in, is this good for the NFL? Is it good for television? Is it good for fall sports, whatever it might be? Are there bigger ramifications in this, or is this really just a trade story about a 39-year-old quarterback, trying to live out the end of his career, at a franchise that hasn't won anything since, barely after the, men walked on the moon?
Aaron Rodgers is news.
Let me correct that. It was actually before men walked on the moon.
Okay. Aaron Rodgers is news,
yeah.
Okay, no matter where he goes. So he comes here, and naturally, he's already news before he gets here, so it's going to be news on top of news, okay? You're going to have that dynamic going on. And then on the field itself, it remains to be seen what he can do, but he is still one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL currently, and people say he's 39. Well, people said that about Tom Brady, and, Tom Brady was still the best at 39. So this guy, when he plays and when he's focused, is one of the greatest quarterbacks who ever lived.
Right.
So if nothing else, New Yorkers will have a privilege to see a real quarterback, because we haven't had a real quarterback in a long time. Arguably, maybe Phil Simms, but again, if there's going to be people that debate this, but certainly in the last 15 years, there hasn't been someone with the aura of Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I count 30 quarterbacks in the last 30 years.
From the Jets?
Yeah. Now, that's guys who maybe started 1 or 2 games.
Okay.
But,
interesting list.
It's Kenny O'Brien, Boomer Esiason, Browning Nagel.
Yes.
Neil O'Donnell, Vinny Testaverde.
Vinny, right.
Ray Lucas, Chad Pennington.
Chad Pennington was supposed to be
Brett
the next
Favre.
thing.
Mark Sanchez. Another next thing.
The butt fumble.
Yeah, exactly.
Love Mark Sanchez.
Geno Smith. Michael Vick was here for 3 games.
Wow.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh McCown, Bryce Petty, Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco started 4 games, Zach Wilson, Mike White.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
So the position is, in terms of karma, you'd sort of say, wow, I mean, if you don't have someone on the level of Aaron Rodgers filling these shoes, it's going to be tough. Like, what I'm saying is, if he doesn't bring them a Super Bowl in the next couple of years, it could be another 30 years before they get the right person in there.
Could be.
Yeah.
I think it's great news for the NFL. I think it's going to have a lot of built-in storylines. I think the amount of profile that a guy like Aaron Rodgers has gotten from working in Green Bay, which again, the world is different now. Green Bay is not like what it was in the 1960s or 70s when it was truly, it's a tiny media market. Getting there is hard. It's 2 hours from it's an hour and a half from Milwaukee.
Right.
I mean, it's far away.
Yeah.
But the world is a different place now.
Yeah.
And they have beat reporters and they're on ESPN all the time.
Absolutely.
In large part, I think because of him and because of Favre before him.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the potential here to really, for him, to transcend football to some degree. Mm-hmm. Say what you will about Tom Brady, obviously the best quarterback, if not the best player in the NFL. Tom Brady does not have that degree of media electricity that a guy like Aaron Rodgers has.
Correct.
He's just not as interesting.
Correct.
So I think it'll be quite a scene for New York and Aaron Rodgers.
The other thing is,
and I'm looking forward to it.
Rodgers sort of came out 2 or 3 years ago in the sense of, when I say coming out, where he was basically pretty quiet.
Yeah.
He was non-controversial up until a couple of years ago, and it really started with him going on the Pat McAfee show and saying the first thing was, he said, I'm vaccinated.
Right.
Right? Or
no, I'm not vaccinated.
Right.
He wasn't vaccinated.
First he said he had been there was a word
he was doing his own research and all that kind of stuff.
Like that.
See, a lot of that stuff.
And then it turned out that he wasn't.
Let me say this. The New York media landscape. The New York media landscape is not what it was 10 or 15 years ago, right? The papers don't dominate New York like they used to.
Right.
But there's still going to be more guys in this locker room than he's ever seen before.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Week in, week out.
Yeah.
Practice out. Beginning in July at training.
Yeah.
And I know he's a big-time quarterback and he's used to the NFL, but Green Bay still is not New York.
Right.
There's a revelation. Green Bay is not New York.
No, that's
so
profound.
Anyway, let's see what happens.
Okay.
It'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to watch.
Fair enough.
All right.
Fair enough.
Our last story today is the Oscars. Again, something we've visited a lot, but I think needs to be looked at because what's interesting about this year is that the show was decent.
Yes.
It was solid.
Yes.
It was sturdy. It was moving. Kiwi Kwan's speech was fantastic. Jamie Lee Curtis was great. The fact that the almost all Asian cast of Everything Everywhere all at once cleaned up. Best Picture, Best Director, Michelle Yeoh won. It was amazing. And it was the Oscars.
Right.
There was no slap. There was no drama. But of course, when people tuned in last year, they didn't know that slap was going to happen.
Right.
We can make kind of, glib arguments about whether or not they should have allowed Will Smith to show up this year, if only because more people would have watched and the show would have gotten better ratings. But as we subsequently learned, the Academy had put almost rules on Jimmy Kimmel about what he could say about the slap. He made a couple of jokes, but they were a bit oblique. No one had any question what he was talking about.
Right.
But it wasn't like he came back to it over and over and over again. The Academy is very sensitive about this. But as a show, even though they restored a lot of the awards that they had removed earlier, it was, your basic, solid, Oscar broadcast. The ratings ticked up a tiny bit, but they are still tens of millions below where they were just 10 years ago, right? Back in the, 2010, 40 million people watched. This year it was under 20. It was 18 point something. Last year it was about the same. The year before was terrible. That was the COVID year. So it's gone up, but to find signs that it's going to somehow really get off the floor and, be what it used to be, I find very difficult. All the more because it wasn't a bad show.
Right.
Right? If the show was a disaster,
right,
you could say, well, this is why it was so.
Right.
Before the broadcast on Sunday night, in the week before that, I saw some storylines emerging, particularly about Everything Everywhere All at Once, that I thought were pretty compelling and would get people to watch. Mm-hmm. And some did. Right. But it wasn't enough to make people really tune into the show. Yeah. My worry is that it is just one more indication that movies simply do not occupy the same headspace and cultural importance that they used to. And you can blame COVID, and you can blame not going to theaters, and you can blame
this was happening before COVID.
And you can blame streaming services.
Yeah.
And all of those things, in fact, do contribute. Mm-hmm. I think the most important contributor is the fact that, and this is not new, it's over the past 10 or 15 years, the level of television, that is to say the things you can watch at home, and I'm not going to distinguish between a movie and TV, but the level of what passes for TV, the level of things that don't play in theaters, COVID or not, is so much better than it used to be that movies just simply don't occupy that place. I mean, in the old days, right, you basically, you had... MASH was the best television show you had. And then you had movies, which were dealing with themes that you couldn't see on television, right?
Correct.
That was number one. You just did not see the kind of things that TV had because it was broadcast television. Yep. With the advent of cable and the improvement in shows, beginning with things like The Sopranos and moving on. Yeah. Adult themes, nuanced storytelling, longer forms of stories, afford the same kind of nuance and thoughtfulness and art that the movies used to do. Meanwhile, movies no longer make that middle tier, the Kramer versus Kramers and those kinds of pictures. They don't make those anymore. No. They buy art movies, right. So something like Tar, or independent movies that are relatively obscure, and then big tentpole movies, which, as you have pointed out, like Top Gun, don't get any awards anyway. Right. They're in a real bind.
Yeah. Okay. They're in a bind. The Grammys are in a bind. All award shows are in a bind. Okay. So music doesn't have the same impact, the same way you're talking about movies, right? We're just moving. This is generational. Okay.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
But the thing that separates the Grammys from the Oscars is that you watch performances. Right. The best part of the Oscars performance, a show on Sunday night, was that song and dance number from that Indian film, a film that nobody saw. Yeah, but it was entertaining. Yeah. Okay. Right? I'd rather watch that than some very earnest fellow who just won Best Cinematographer or Best Short Film thank his mother.
But you have at the Grammys, you have performances too.
No, that's my point. That's what makes the Grammys better.
Oh, okay.
It's that it's basically, they figured it out. It's 3 hours of musical performances.
Well, what they
this was
did
one on the
is
Oscars.
They figured out a way, and again, I don't know that their ratings are so much better after everything they did at the end of the day. So the concept could be that people over 40 don't really watch award shows
Well,
anymore.
they've never been as high as the Oscars, but my guess is they haven't fallen as far.
Okay. The idea is, they reached out to actively embrace a lot more of what was going on, but then they also gave awards to those particular areas of music, and they expanded everything to try to get them to a different place. The Oscars seem to be doing the same thing. So let's just say you improve the Oscars, new and improved. And, there are a lot of things that I saw. There is a new administration in place. Mm-hmm. at the Academy. Okay, so that's interesting because you could sort of feel that, like the set design and stuff like that. So there could be an argument to make that no matter how good the show is, the ratings are only going to go so high at the end of the day. And we are where we are. And it's still the top show in entertainment. After the Super Bowl, it's probably the top show, in America that everyone sort of gets together and watches and talks about.
Yeah. I mean, live TV is basically, sports and award shows and election night.
Yeah. So it may not be. And again, people didn't know that the slap was going to occur.
No.
So, and people didn't know that they were going to give the award to the wrong movie like 2 years before that, right? But maybe it's just at the point where it is what it is, and no matter what they do, it's going to do okay, and that's it. And, maybe that's how it rolls out.
Yeah, I think nibbling at the edges or tweaking the edges is not where it's at. I don't think that the Academy will ever approve anything really radical. You and I joked on one of our other media appearances that maybe it should be the same day as a Super Bowl, or that the Super Bowl, the Oscars should take place at halftime of the Super Bowl, or the Super Bowl should take place in the middle of the Oscars. Ha ha ha. But I think short of any kind of truly revolutionary notion, it'll still be a show that 20 million people might tune into. But the idea that it goes back to anywhere near what it had used to be, even 10 years ago, I think is a pipe dream. It just can't do that. And it's not the show's fault. It is the fault of where the movies sit in our culture.
Everyone's famous now.
Yeah.
Okay. Andy Warhol said it. Okay. Sly and the Family Stone said it. Wow. Everybody is a star.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So are we as enamored of movie stars? In my opinion, people used to watch the show more for the movie stars, or as much for the movie stars who were in attendance as for the awards themselves. In other words, you had Jack in the room, right? You had people like
every
that.
year, and he never won.
Maybe you didn't care if he won. It was Jack. So you were going there to watch Jack or whoever your person was, right? And we just don't have that level of stardom anymore because everybody's a star on TikTok or wherever. Right. So there is some of that the Academy is having to deal with, like every other medium that involves humans who are stars.
Right.
Music too. Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah. I wonder if looking back on it, part of the problem was after Billy Crystal, who I think did 9.
The best.
There was an era where it was a real rocky road for some of these hosts, right?
Yeah.
David Letterman and others. They just didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
And I think it really made the show kind of wobbly.
Yeah.
I mean, say what you will about Johnny Carson and Billy Crystal, and some people got tired of Billy Crystal. It was incredibly entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it was a different time.
Yeah.
But you tuned in to watch that montage, and which Jimmy Kimmel tried to do this time. And
but Jimmy Kimmel doesn't dance and sing.
Well, not only that,
Billy Crystal does.
And as I watched the montage, I thought, okay, this is getting nostalgic for Billy Crystal. I'm not sure that's what you want to do.
Right. But, for a try for this year, and again, they have a new administration in place, it might not have been a bad way to go, to just sort of like, hey, let's get this one off the ground, and next year we can start to play around with trying to do some other things.
Maybe.
Hopefully it'll work out.
Maybe. Like I said, it was a solid show.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
The culture isn't what it was, and that may be your problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we've solved all the world's problems today.
I think we have.
Maybe they can have Aaron Rodgers on the Oscars next year.
I think he should host the Oscars next year, right?
We could be onto something.
Yeah.
It'd be good for the Jets.
I mean, come on.
Tell your friends, tell your aunts and uncles,
like
us everywhere. We're the Entertainment Brothers.
We're on YouTube, by the way.
A bit of housekeeping. We will not be here next week.
Okay.
But we'll be here the week after that.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always, in the zeitgeist.
Enjoy your late March, and we'll see you again week after next.
Take care, everybody.